All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining me today for today's webinar on film, television and media. So my name is Ruby and I'm a reference librarian here at the National Library. So this webinar is being broadcast on Ngunnawal and Ngambri country. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging and celebrating the first Australians on whose traditional lands we meet and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. This presentation has been developed by our 2019 Indigenous graduate, Nicole, who joins me today and will be presenting part of today's webinar. So hopefully you've joined us today to learn about some film, television and media themed items held in the National Library's collection. And I'll be talking through the way in which you can go about accessing these items. So we've aimed this webinar at people who work in the film, television and media industry, and how you can use our collection in your work, and also for those who are more broadly interested in how our collection reflects the changing media landscape in Australia over the past century. So in today's webinar, we'll be taking a broad exploration of the library's collection, pulling out some interesting and relevant examples, and explaining how our services can support your work. We'll have a question break in the middle of the webinar to answer any questions that have been asked, and also one at the end. So looking at us, the National Library, we're located here in Canberra, next to Lake Burley Griffin. We are a non-lending library or reference library. So this means our library users are unable to take our collection material out of the building. The library's role, as defined by the National Library Act 1960, is to ensure that the documentary resources of national significance relating to Australia and the Australian people, as well as significant non-Australian library materials, are collected, preserved and made accessible. Currently, we refer to that through our strategic priorities of collect, connect and collaborate. So looking at our collection, we've collected almost 260 kilometres of material, approximately 10 million collection items. And every year we add to that with roughly 2 kilometres more. And so here we can see an image at our offsite storage, which I feel gets across that sort of idea of kilometres of material. Our digital collection is also constantly expanding and currently contains 5 petabytes of digital storage, a petabyte being 1,000 million bytes. We facilitate access to our collection through the library building here in Canberra and through our online services. A fun little inclusion I've added is Isaac, who helps deliver our collection material to our readers here in the building. So each robot is called Isaac. It's a collective term, and Isaac's one of the popular attractions in our behind the scenes tours and has been featured in several news articles, including by the ABC News. So this guy helps deliver those kilometres of material to our reading rooms. The major part of our collection is thanks to legal deposit. So legal deposit is a requirement under the Copyright Act 1968 that has enabled the National Library of Australia to collect Australian publications for more than 100 years. So legal deposit applies to any Australian person, group or organisation that makes this material available to the public for sale or for free. So what this means is that anything that has been published in Australia should be in our collection. So since 2016, we also have the e-deposit service where we collect electronic books, journals, magazines, newsletters, maps, sheet music and websites to preserve them for the community and future generations. And this has expanded our collection a lot more into material that we call Born Digital. So thanks to legal deposit, the National Library has a comprehensive collection of Australian material from the last 100 years. So in addition to our general printed collection, we have a range of format-based and themed collections in our library. And here we can see a nice little overview. So each area has specialist library staff who work closely with collection material and manage access. The majority of these collections are primary source material, a primary source being an authoritative first-hand glimpse into the past. One collection we don't have in the library is a film collection, which is unfortunate, but the National Film and Sound Archive is a separate institution which houses Australia's audiovisual archive and is responsible for developing, preserving, maintaining and providing access to a national collection of copies of film, television, sound and audiovisual materials and related items. So the Film and Sound Archives collection was actually part of the National Library here until 1984, when it became an independent cultural organisation. And so they took their film collection quite rightly with them, and that's why we don't have any specific film materials here. We do, however, have a very strong media collection that explores the film industry through other formats, which I'll cover today. So what do we have in our collection? A large range and variety of materials that you can use in your film and media work, and unique collections that reflect the media industry in Australia. To start exploring some of these collections, I'm now going to hand over to my co-presenter Nicole, who will introduce you to our maps collection.
Thanks, Ruby, and hello to everyone listening in to today's webinar. As Ruby mentioned, I'm Nicole. I'm one of the library's graduates for 2019. And before I begin, I too would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're broadcasting from, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, and I pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. So I did get a lot of enjoyment from researching today's topic of film, television and media. It's a subject I'm quite interested in, and it's also what I majored in at university. So having this theme to focus on allowed me the opportunity to search through many of the different collection areas. And something I discovered in the early stages of exploring the vast collection is the notion of scope creep. So you may have all come across this, even when you set out with a clear idea of what you want to research. The ability to stay on topic is nearly impossible when you start to dig down and discover items of interest. So on that note, you may notice that even though I'm focusing specifically on cartographic material held in our maps collection, the way in which you're able to use the information found on the maps is quite varied. Also, before I show you a few examples, if you would like to know more about how to best navigate your way through our maps collection, I can highly recommend one of our recent webinars that was presented by Susie. She is one of our reference librarians here, and she offers some great advice on how to best locate specific maps and also how to go about ordering digitized copies of digitized maps. So this recording is available to rewatch either via our YouTube channel or directly from the National Library website, which is nla.gov.au. So I will admit, as a staff member of the library, I am in a convenient position to gather information. But you should all know that if you ever do come to a dead end, especially when you first start researching, we as librarians can offer assistance and guidance. Assistance from staff is not only limited to patrons who frequent our reading rooms here in the building, we can also offer advice to those of you who are browsing our website and exploring the digital collection. So this is through our Ask a Librarian service. So as we perform searches throughout this presentation, we will point out to you where the Ask a Librarian service points are located. So through the next section of the webinar, I would like to show you some of my favourite items which are held here at the library. They relate to today's theme, and they're held within our maps collection. So firstly, we have the Australian movie map. It was published in 1996, and when folded, it appears as a brochure with tourism information, but it folds out to a map of Australia. So this is a great example of material the library aims to collect, but it may not be the first thing you would consider searching for in our catalogue. The map pinpoints locations of motion pictures filmed here in Australia, ranging from 1906 to 1996. And you might be able to see the locations are numbered clockwise, starting from the top in Darwin. So they've included 20 film locations and around 70 other attractions and landmarks relating to individual Australian films, the film industry, and movie locations. So overall, it serves as a film tapestry, location guide, and travel companion. This particular map is not yet digitized, so I've just included a few photographs for the session today. The second item I've chosen to show you all is a map of the land of Narnia and surrounding countries. This is a colour printed poster of Pauline Bain's original 1971 artwork, and these particular posters were published by Penguins Books in 1972 to promote the paperback series of C.S. Lewis' Chronicles of Narnia. Part of the map had already been sketched by Lewis in his manuscript of Prince Caspian in 1951. Bain's idea was to have the map themed medieval rather than a survey of mountains and castles. So she included the wind blowing at the corners and a few heraldic ships, whales, and dolphins in the sea. The third item I'd like to share with you is Star Trek Star Charts, the complete atlas of Star Trek. It is a paperback atlas published in 2002 by Jeffrey Mandel. This is a full colour book that helps to put the whole Star Trek universe into perspective. It serves well as a visual aid to make sense of where galaxies are located to one another and highlights where the Federation is in relation to all other places in the galaxy. It's a very detailed cartographic guide, which includes the Milky Way maps showing the quadrants, galactic arms, followed by a tally of charted worlds and civilizations, then a political overview map of this quadrant. And that's just to name a few. So the next item I've chosen to show you all is, this is called TV Maps. So it is a map which is loosely based on the style of a 1960s Washington street map, which is home to America's first TV station. And its aim is to pay homage to TV gold with, it has fictional districts dedicated to, for example, The Simpsons, South Park, Sesame Street, Kids TV, and Sci-Fi. It also features landmarks named after some of TV's biggest stars, such as Oprah Winfrey, Ricky Lake, Nick Park, Harry Hill, and Benny Hill. So I could sit here and talk about all of my favourite items. I could sit here all day talking about them, but I would like to show you in the next section how you might go about actually using the catalogue search function to discover items just like these. Okay, so now that we're on the National Library homepage, to search in our collection, I'll just click through to the catalogue. And the first search we'll look for is the Star Trek Atlas. So to find it in the catalogue, you only need to type in 2 words. So just Star and Trek. And to narrow the number of search results, we can just select subject here And we can limit the search to only show results for maps. If we select map here and then press the find button. So here you can see this is a very successful search. There's only one item listed and it's exactly what we're looking for. But as most of you have probably all experienced, searching for items is not always as easy as this. So if we just start a new search, we'll click on catalogue. So we'll try to search for something a bit more broadly. So if we just type in the word broadcast, we'll limit the search so we're only finding maps in the results, and then click the find button. So you can see here there are a few more results that have come up. And as I scroll through, you can see some of the items have the image thumbnail. So we might have a look at this one. So in the catalogue entry here, there is quite a bit of detail. We can see we have the scale at which the map is set. And in the description and notes, there's a lot more information here as well. Because it is a digitized, it has been digitized, we can have a closer look at the item by clicking on the thumbnail here. And the digitized image opens up in the Trove viewer. So it's quite a high definition scan, and you can zoom in on any area of the map just by clicking on the area you want to see closer. And we can just recenter the map by dragging it with the mouse to the middle. So we can see here the title of the map and the key. To zoom back out, you can use the magnifying glass with the minus symbol here, and then just recenter the map. So we'll just have a quick look here. This is where we are. So here you can see the different kinds of wireless radio waves that were available in Australia in the 1930s. So on that note, I'm going to hand back over to Ruby, and I will just thank you all for listening in today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nicole. And I should extend my thanks to Nicole as well for developing today's session. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint now, and we'll continue with the rest of the content. So moving on to a new area now, we have our newspapers and family history team here at the library, and they manage our newspapers collection and answer family history questions sent to us from around the world. Family history is only becoming more and more popular as online access to genealogy records becomes easier. It forms a large part of our learning program here at the library, and we have extensive online resources, such as research guides and database to support family history researchers. Our Newspapers and Family History Zone has been featured in episodes of the television show Who Do You Think You Are?, especially featuring our newspaper collections for family history research. So we've combined newspapers and family history, as newspapers can be a key resource for family historians. But today I want to look more closely at our newspaper collection for another reason. As newspapers are a valuable media resource, both for contemporary and historical news. You might be searching for a specific article or curious about how important events were reported on in the news. We collect all Australian newspapers, ranging from capital city dailies, major regional newspapers, a range of country town newspapers, newspapers published by ethnic groups and political organisations, as well as newspapers representing special interests. We also have the largest collection of overseas newspapers in Australia. our newspaper collections from the Asia and Pacific region are particularly strong. So we collect and store the printed editions, but we also microfilm a number of state and regional newspapers, as they are much easier to store and access, and it preserves the original printed paper. Some of you may be familiar with microfilm. It has been around for decades, but we are still creating it and using it today. Like a photograph film reel, the newspaper is captured on 35mm acetate film. We can capture thousands of pages of newspapers on a single reel. We do supply our microfilm reels on interlibrary loan, so speak to your local library if you require access to this material and cannot visit us in Canberra. However, I want to look past the microfilm and look at what you can access online. Most of you will be aware that newspapers these days have online websites where you can access newspaper articles. Some of these are free to access, however, some do require paid subscriptions. Often, however, it can be difficult finding archival newspaper articles on these news websites. So if you're wanting to research published newspaper articles, we have quite a number of options freely available here at the library. So most of you are very familiar with Trove. For those who don't know, it's a site that collates library and institution collections from around Australia, providing a central site to search. And its most popular content zone is its digitised newspapers, where you can search Australian newspapers from 1803 to 1954. The 1954 date is due to copyright, as newspapers published post-1955 are within copyright and have not been made available. There are a few newspapers available post-1955 in Trove, such as the Canberra Times, where we've been given specific copyright permission to upload, but there is only a few exceptions to this. Trove is very easy to search and a great research tool for discovering and accessing historical newspaper articles, as well as other materials. Once you find a relevant article, you can download it and use it as you wish. You can find film reviews, cinema advertisements, and other articles exploring film and media topics. I did a search for the story of the Kelly Gang, most of you knowing that's one of the first, Australia's first feature film. We got over 1,000 results. And you can see just from the top few results, published in the early 1900s when the film was released, and includes regional papers as well as major city dailies. So I know a lot of you are familiar with Trove, but if you do want some more help into researching Trove, we have quite a number of webinar recordings that go into a lot of detail, particularly Discover Trove, which is an introductory session, and Trove for Family History, which explores mainly that newspaper zone. So Trove is the best place to go to access Australian newspapers pre-1955. But if you're after more contemporary archives, you'll need to visit our e-resources portal. And so our e-resources contain a variety of electronic resources, such as full-text journals, newspapers, ebooks, and dictionaries. A number of our databases, including the ones I feature today, can be accessed from home or work using a National Library card. So the key databases I'll be highlighting today are our newspaper databases, but we also have a huge range of other database collections that may contain relevant information for your media research. So a number of you are familiar with our e-resources, and you may notice that we've recently enhanced our e-resources portal and now have a search box where you can full text search the majority of our databases. You can type in keywords, subjects, or other information and find journal articles or other relevant information that you can access. This search unfortunately doesn't pick up some of the articles from our bigger newspaper databases, but you can individually enter these databases and search and access them from there. So if you haven't used this new e-resources portal, I highly recommend it. It's very user-friendly, and we have a lot of help advice as well if you need it on the page. So the three databases I wanted to highlight today are Factiva, the Sydney Morning Herald Archives, and Press Reader. And all of these are available off-site with a library card free of charge. Factiva is a major newspaper database that you may have used before and has holdings from the late 1980s to today. You can search articles from a huge number of Australian newspapers using full text searching, as well as overseas newspapers. We also have our Sydney Morning Herald archives, and this is one of the very few databases that offers access to newspapers between the post-Trove, past 1955, and pre-internet, 1995 in this instance, period, as most newspapers from this time are still only available on microfilm. But if you are after an article in the Herald or of the Sydney area, you are in luck because this is a really user-friendly database that's easy to navigate. And last we have Press Reader, which isn't so much an archive as it only holds the last 3 months of publications. This database has a great selection of magazines and newspapers from around Australia and overseas. So I'll just quickly demonstrate how to access these databases in our new eResources portal. So if I click back through to the homepage, we can see under the catalogue bar that Nicole took us to, we have a tab for our eResources. We also can see links to Trove if you want to get through it through our homepage, and also to get a library card as well if you haven't yet got that library card. But for those who do, you can leave this session and start searching our eResources straight away. So I'll click on the accepting terms and conditions, and this is our new platform. So if we wanted to search more broadly for journal articles, I could type in a keyword here, but because I know which database to go to, I'm going to click on our databases A to Z, and this is how I can find the databases like Factiva. Today I'll just find Press Reader. So typing not even the full word, we can see it's this result here. We get a little bit of a description about what we hold. If we click through, we then get taken straight into the database. And here we can see the different magazines and newspapers. So with the other two databases, Factiva in particular, you're really only searching for the text of the newspapers. The Sydney Morning Herald one, you do see the digitised images of the newspaper like in Trove. But I've chosen Press Reader in part because we get these full colour pages that we can explore. So if you were wanting to keep up to date with news and events, definitely recommend this one. And again, we can limit by country to Australian publications. And we can see it's a number of magazines as well as newspapers as well. And it has really good international holdings. So you can search for a topic that's in the news and you can see what countries around the world, how they've written those articles and what perspective they've taken as well. All right, back to the PowerPoint. Before I go too far, so our newspapers collection is not only resourceful for researching information and data for a film, documentary or news story, but you can also get footages and images through our Copies Direct service. So this is particularly for those older newspapers. And I'll touch on our Copies Direct service a little bit more later on. All right, so before I go any further, I'll see if there's been any questions asked. It doesn't look like we have any questions pending live answer, which is great. Please ask questions as I go through though, if you have any, and I'll answer them at the end of today's session. All right, so moving on to our next collection now is our pictures collection. And the pictures collection here at the library contains over 1 million photographs and artworks, documenting Australian life, society, personalities and events. It includes portraits, landscapes and structures, political cartoons and images of everyday life. We collect pictures for their documentary value, not for their artistic value. So while there are works by significant artists and photographers, most are creations of ordinary people documenting their surroundings and experiences. The vast majority of publishing questions we receive are on our pictures collection, as there are many people who come across images in our collection that they would like to use in their documentary, film or media project. If you do want to publish any material from our pictures collection, we have an online form on our website. Copyright permissions may apply, and I'll be covering copyright and publishing collection material in more detail at the end of today's presentation. So I want to highlight a few relevant and interesting pictures collections today to give you an understanding of the scope of the collection and how it can be a valuable resource in your work. The main collections I'll highlight have been digitised, meaning they are free to search and view from home. So starting with prominent Australian photographer Robert McFarlane, whose images we hold span 1963 to 2000 and captures the Australian film and media industry during this period. His collection also includes images of King's Cross and Redfern in the 1960s and unemployment and development of Australia as well. He also features really lovely portraits of prominent Australians in the fields of film, television, radio, theatre, politics, literature, sport and art. And here's just two examples here. We hold the Andrew Chapman campaign photograph collection from 1975 to 2004, which includes portraits of key political figures of the time, as well as the supporters, protesters, and the media on the campaign trail. A nice reflective photo of Bob Hawke. And here we can see another one of his images, a behind the scenes of Paul Keating talking to James Morrison on the Today Show with Kerry Ann Kennelly back in '96. Louis Sezelia is a Canberra-based photographer who spent part of his career here at the National Library. We hold over 4,000 photographs by Louis in our collection, the vast majority which are digitised. He captured many key events in Canberra from the last several decades, from portraits to these images which present or capture a different perspective of the media presence around stories. Moving on to Wolfgang Sievers now. This is one of Australia's most significant and influential photographers who specialise in architectural and industrial photography. So we hold over 13,000 photographs and 51,000 negatives of Sievers from 1938 to 1991. So Sievers' collection includes important photographs of the early days of television, mainly focusing on the technical setups. So we can see here a gentleman with early television equipment. I'm sure those who are working in this industry, I'm sure it's changed significantly. And again, he even has photos of televisions being constructed. So very much a sort of behind the scenes look at this period of time. In addition to individual photographers, we also hold collections from major media bodies such as Fairfax. So in this instance, this is the Fairfax archive of glass plate negatives, about 18,000 images all up in our collection. So these were images taken by Fairfax photographers, trying to capture the perfect image to correspond with an article for the daily newspaper. Here we can see underworld figure Kate Lee. And the significance of this collection is related to its original purpose, to document newsworthy and historical events, people and places from the 1900s to the 1940s. So it includes images around topics such as the construction of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, which we can see here. The Great Depression, politicians, sportsmen and women. This image again was from that opening of the Sydney Harbour Bridge and Captain Francis de Groot cut the ribbon too early, as well as more rural and everyday life. We have this lovely one of children racing down in billy carts, as well as sort of a look at a more of domestic scene in Darlinghurst. Another interesting historical collection is the William Henry Corkhill Tilba collection, which is a favourite of mine and a great example of one of the unique personal collections we hold. So William Henry Corkhill was an accountant, cheesemaker and farm manager who decided in 1890 to become a photographer. So this previously unknown man took over 20 years, many photos of the Tilba area and allows us to see life in this community as it unfolds and develops. So it includes, so if you're looking for reference points of a small Australian town in the 1900s, exploring these images which have been digitised, we can see how life was in a small but thriving rural community. Included in our pictures collection is political cartoons, which you can discover easily in our catalogue simply by searching for the politician by name. And all of our pictures collections is discoverable through our website. And we are forever digitising more and more material so that you can view and download images from home. That being said, there is still a large number of photographs in the collection that have yet to be digitised. So you can still discover these through our catalogue. However, you may need to visit the library building to access the collection, or you can use our Copies Direct service to request copies of specific items. So for example, one collection that is not available digitally is the Penny Tweedy collection, which we can see from the catalogue screenshot I've taken, has over 160,000 photographs of Penny's photojournalist activities over the years. So as I've touched on a few times now, we have a copying service here at the library called Copies Direct. And this is a fast, easy and inexpensive way to get copies of material from our collections. So you can get copies of collection materials from all of our collections, including what I cover today. But I wanted to highlight it now as it's particularly useful for our pictures collection. With collections that are not yet digitised, it allows you to receive a digital copy of that material. If the material you are after has already been digitised, we can provide you with a high resolution image, as the digitised images in our catalogue are lower resolution files. Now, though I've said you can get copies of library material, it is dependent on copyright. So you may be limited to how much can be copied, or the use might be restricted to personal or research purposes. To use copies for publishing, you will need the material to be out of copyright or you have copyright permission. And I will touch on copyright at the end of today's session. But if you are unsure, we actually recommend putting through your Copies Direct order, and our staff can advise you if extra steps are required for copying permissions. To place a Copies Direct order, the easiest way is through the catalogue record. So if I click through now, so here we can see that item record of the Penny Tweedy archive, and we can scroll down. So even though it's telling us there's a digitised item, this isn't unfortunately digitised images. It's just giving us a sort of a finding aid description of the collection. In the library, if we were to visit the library and access this collection physically, this is how we'd go about it with our library card. The third tab along is our order a copy. And so we can see here, it links to our Copies Direct service and an option to add to cart. So by clicking on this, this just takes us through to an online form where you can follow the steps and then get that copying placed. And so the Copies Direct website also has more information about that. Unlike other collection areas, picture staff also offer very detailed advice on how to access pictures for filming. So if you're wanting to visit the collection here in Canberra and film the physical material, we do have a web page you can refer to. Just recently, we had an ABC film crew come and visit to film pictures material. All right, moving on to our next collection area now, the Manuscripts collection. Our Manuscripts collection ranges from single items to very large collections. So collections comprise a wide variety of unpublished materials, including letters, diaries, sketches and artworks, notebooks, maps, photographs, literary works, organisation records, blogs, and many other types of records in both paper and digital form. So I wanted to have a quick look now at the manuscript collections of some of Australia's leading media figures to give you an understanding of what we might hold in this collection. So whether you're after inspiration for your next project or researching the life of one of these prominent Australian figures, you can see here we've got some director and filmmaker collections. We have a number of collections around prominent Australian actors. And this material often includes diaries and personal letters, which provide private insights into working processes, as well as professional and personal relationships as well. Continue with the lists of manuscript collections. Here are some other key figures. I'm sure most of you will recognise some of the names. And a few more for you. So a real mix of different people within the media industry. If they're a prominent Australian, there's a chance that we'll have that collection available. We also have substantial manuscripts collections on other key Australian figures, particularly politicians, but as well as other key figures. With the Robert Menzies collection, one of our most accessed, and it's around 600 boxes of materials for Menzies. To access our manuscripts collection, it is recommended to come and visit us and look through the collection yourself, as some of the collections are very sizable and can be difficult to determine the exact contents through the online finding aids. If we hold a manuscript collection that is relevant to your research, I would highly recommend exploring it, as these collections contain unpublished, valuable insights into the work and personal lives of these Australians. So we have an oral history and folklore collection as well here at the library, and this dates back to the 1950s and includes a rich and diverse collection of interviews and recordings with Australians from all walks of life. The collection consists of around 45,000 hours of recordings and includes folklore recordings, interviews with distinguished Australians, interviews with people who've lived through significant social trends and conditions, as well as some recordings on environmental sound. A lot of the prominent Australians who I featured in that little list in our manuscripts collection also have interviews as well in this oral history collection. So if you're looking at telling the story of an individual, you could very well find published and unpublished material in our collection, associated photographs, as well as interviews of that individual. One of the main collections in oral history is the Hazel de Burgh collection, with 1,290 recordings of interviews and readings of prominent Australian poets, artists, writers, composers, actors, and more. Again, like our other collection areas, we have digitised a number of oral history and folklore recordings. So if I click through to our website again, and again, we're taken to the catalogue and we can see this is the page for the Hazel de Burgh collection, which you could find very easily just by searching Hazel de Burgh. We get a nice description and summary. And this is what we call a parent level or collection level record. So within this, we can see under related records, we can actually go into the collection a little bit further. So if I click on this link here, we can see all the items and materials that sit within this collection. And we can see quite a number coming up. But I just want to draw our attention to this search bar on this narrow search option on the right-hand side. We can see we have quite a number of options to refine our search by, such as decade, geographic, subject area. But what I want to do is we can quite quickly limit to all online. So if we're from home, straight away, we're getting just results that we can access from home. And we have a thumbnail that indicates we can listen online. So just clicking on that thumbnail will take us straight through, accept the terms and conditions, and we can see we can play the recording as well as a really excellent transcript as well with keywords. So you can often search as well. If you're just wanting to find a reference within an interview, you can search the transcript to see where that reference might have taken place in the interview. And just looking a little bit closely at the oral history collection, I've just put up on the slide some of the other collections that we have of particular significance here, such as the Folk Music by John Meredith. We have the Bringing Them Home Oral History Project, Forgotten Australians and Former Child Migrants Project. So this is speaking to interviewing sort of general Australians on their experiences and perspectives, as well as Australian Paralympic stories as well. And coming up to the end of our collections, we have our Ephemera collection, which is a collection of minor publications and pamphlets, as well as leaflets, handbills, invitations, cards, menus, and junk mail. Essentially, it's a lot of material that wasn't intended to be preserved, but we have preserved it. So our Ephemera collection can receive a lot of media coverage, as we do public call outs around elections and other key events such as the same-sex marriage survey. So here you can see some of the same-sex marriage survey material that we collected, as well as a news article written by ABC News about that. All right, so now what everyone's been waiting for, the fun, the copyright. So as I've touched on through looking at some of our collection highlights, use of the National Library's collection will be dependent on copyright. So accessing or researching material often doesn't require any permissions. All the access is controlled by us here. However, if you want to publish material, this is when you need to determine if the material is in copyright. Now, there is a lot of information around copyright in Australia, and I only have a general knowledge of copyright, I'll admit. So it's always worth visiting the copyright pages on our website or visiting the Australian Copyright Council's website, which has great fact sheets around the different aspects of copyright. Looking at copyright duration, under current law for literary, dramatic and musical works that were published during the lifetime of the author, copyright lasts for 70 years from the end of the year in which the author has died. For published sound recordings and film, the duration of copyright is 70 years from the end of the year in which the recording or film was published. Under previous copyright laws, material that was created or published before 1955, or if the author died prior to 1955, that material is out of copyright. And this is where this includes that newspaper material available on Trove. So conveniently, the National Library Catalogue and Trove both provide an approximate calculation of the copyright status of a particular work in the catalogue record. So we can see here a screenshot from the item record, and it actually tells us the copyright status, whether it's in or out of copyright, and then the reason why. Once copyright expires, there are no longer any copyright related restrictions on its copying or reuse, and this is sometimes referred to being in the public domain. We have a large amount of collection material that we have digitised and made freely available to download that is out of copyright, and so this means you're free to publish the material in your next work. That being said, if you are wanting to publish any of our unique collection material, we request that you inform us through our intention to publish form. So this will allow us to inform you of your responsibilities in relation to copyright, conditions of use, moral rights, performance rights, and correct forms of acknowledgement. And we also have a web page as well on how to correctly cite our collection material as well, even if it is out of copyright. As reference librarians, we receive a lot of questions around clarification on copyright for materials in our collection. So if you're not sure, please send us a message. So now we're coming to the end of today's webinar, and as we've looked at a huge range of material in our collection, I just want to quickly go over again collection discovery and access. So we saw the catalogue is the best place to search our collection, and that can just be accessed through our homepage. Our collection is also discoverable through Trove as well, as that is a collection of different library collections from around Australia. So you can discover our collection as well through Trove. And as well, we have our e-resources for our online journals and databases. So to access our on-site collection and electronic resources, you will need a library card. So those that don't yet have a library card, you can register very quickly online through that homepage link and have it posted out to you for free. Those materials that are not yet digitised or you're wanting to view the original material, this is where you come and visit us in Canberra and access our collection materials in our reading rooms. So a reminder that today's session and any of our previous webinars are recorded and uploaded to the National Library's YouTube channel. So if you want to watch this one again or watch any of the ones we've touched on and more, please visit the channel. You can subscribe to if you'd like, and you can be alerted to any new videos that are added. You can also keep in touch with us through our social media platforms, where you can hear of events, new resources and highlights of our collection through one of these platforms. All right, so that's been today's presentation. I'm now just going to see if there's been any questions. If you do have any questions, please send them through. All right, it doesn't look like we have any questions pending at the moment. Hopefully that means I've answered all your questions, or I've also noticed Heather's been typing a few responses as well, which is wonderful. Here we go. Bob asked if we have any radio holdings. So unfortunately we don't have any radio recordings in our collection. That is held at the National Film and Sound Archives. They have really useful guides on their website about radio recordings. We have some more of the related material around broadcasting and things like that. All right, great. Well, thank you so much for attending today. We'll wrap up today's session. So if you have any further questions, you can use that Ask a Librarian service to contact us. And we have some upcoming sessions as well. So especially if you want to explore our new e-resources platform, we have a new webinar coming up in just a few weeks. We also have one looking more closely at ephemera, as well as subjects around dangerous and persuasive females coming up at the end of October, which looks at our collection surrounding women, important and influential women through history. So I'd recommend watching those. So we'll stay around for a few minutes longer. So if you have any last minute questions, we can answer them by text, but a reminder that the recording and links from today's session will be emailed out to you all tomorrow. So thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the afternoon.